Imagine a scenario permeated with malice and decay, where humans yearn to establish connections with angelic beings. Daughters end up conceiving children of their own parents. Today we will delve into the narrative of Law, a man whose decisions have put him at the center of extraordinary events. Prepare to testify at trial. And the divine wrath that will culminate in the annihilation of a civilization. In the face of this, I ask for your support. Short and subscribe to our channel. I ask you to stay with us until the end of this amazing story. Intriguing because Lot's decisions led his daughters to lie with his own. Father, the first accounts of Lot in the Bible are recorded in the book of Genesis, beginning with chapter 11. The story of Lot, a biblical figure, begins with uncertainty about the origin and meaning of his name. Some scholars suggest that it may represent the idea of a covering veil, thus indicating a reference to the importance of presenting yourself well in front of others. According to the Bible, after his father's death, Lot left the Urdu Chaldeans and traveled to Aran with his grandfather, Terah, his uncle Abraham, and Sarai when Abraham left. Aran after death. From Terah, Lot went to Canaan, and during the great famine in Canaan, Lot and Abraham went down to Egypt and settled there. But after being cheated, Pharaoh of Egypt drove Abraham and Sarai out and brought Lot back with them to Canaan. During this time, both Abraham and Lot prospered significantly. Their flocks grew to the point where the area could no longer accommodate both, which led to disputes among their shepherds. The contrast between Abraham and Lot in the biblical narrative. It is evidenced mainly by the fundamental choices they make in the face of the opportunities and challenges presented in their journeys. Abraham was characterized by his obedience and trust in God's promises, which was reflected in the way he conducted his life. His faith guides his choices, becoming a remarkable example of someone who puts the divine will above earthly interests. It is essential to remember the episode of the three mysterious visitors in Mamre. One day, Abraham is sitting at the entrance of his tent under the oaks of Mamre when he suddenly realizes the presence of three men in front of him. The intensity of the account suggests that these visitors had an extraordinary nature, as Abraham quickly bowed down in awe before them. At this point, he demonstrates the remarkable hospitality invites them to rest while offering water to wash their feet and food to restore their strength. During this meeting, Abraham and Sarah receive a surprising and transformative piece of news. One of the visitors reveals that at the same time next year, Sarah, even though she is already old, would have a child. This divine promise is in line with the previous, in which God had assured Abraham a great number of descendants, comparable to the stars in the sky. The story of the visit to Mamre not only highlights Abraham's exemplary hospitality, but also reveals the intimate and personal nature of the relationship between God and his people. On the other hand, the faithful servant Lot seemed to be increasingly influenced by the temptations of the material world and tempted by seemingly prosperous opportunities. For these reasons, Abraham and Lot decided to follow different paths at the time of separation. Abraham generously allowed Lot to choose the land he would occupy first. Abraham's decision to separate from Lot, seeking to preserve harmony and avoid conflict, emphasized spiritual maturity. That one, patriarch who values peace and communion with God above material disputes. Lot chose the fertile plains from Jordan to the Dead Sea near Sodom. He was attracted by the beauty and fertility of the region, allowing himself to be influenced purely by material considerations. This decision, while understandable from a human point of view, highlights Lot's vulnerability to the temptations of the world. In contrast to Abraham's spiritual firmness, after the separation, Lot settled in Sodom, where he quickly became involved in local affairs and seemed to have attained a prominent social position. However, the Bible describes the inhabitants of Sodom as extremely wicked, a situation that deeply disturbed Lot. In the New Testament, the Apostle Peter describes Lot's constant suffering. While Lot was in Sodom, a battle took place in which the kings of Mesopotamia defeated the cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admas, Eboim, and Zoar. In this conflict, all the possessions of Sodom were plundered, and many inhabitants, including Lot, were taken away. Captured knowing. From the incident, Abraham organized a rescue force that, in a night battle, defeated the enemy army and recovered Lot's belongings. Despite the war involving Sodom, Lot chose not to leave the city, and his story continues to be told in the Bible. The narrative continues with the visit of angels to Sodom, a city immersed in chaos and perversion, the divine presence in the corrupt city. It highlights God's concern for human wickedness, in line with the message of Jeremiah 23 verse 4, emphasizing God's attention to the cry that comes from injustice. This situation resonates with the biblical message that God is vigilant and willing to act in the face of evil. Does the Lord declare his intention to investigate the sins of Sodom? Revealing his righteousness and rejection of iniquity. However, in the face of such disappointment, God decides to destroy the city. Does the narrative highlight the depravity of the inhabitants of Sodom, evident in how they received the Lord's angels, and the sinful behavior of the men in the city, the desire to engage in relations with angels? It was one of the main reasons for the destruction of the city. During this riot, Lot tried to calm the situation in a controversial way by offering his daughter to the men of the city, reflecting his weakness and the harmful effects of the city on him. At this moment, the Bible is immersed in Abraham's courageous intercession before the Lord. Revealing a genuine search for understanding and divine justice. Aware of the imminent destruction of Sodom, Abraham dares to question God about the possibility of saving the righteous along with the ungodly. This bold dialogue echoes the exhortation in James 5 verse 16, emphasizing that the prayer of a righteous person can have powerful effects. The narrative continues with the bold negotiation between Abraham and God, in which Abraham questions the possibility of saving the city for the sake of the righteous. Psalm 86:15 expresses this context by stating, "But you, Lord, are a compassionate and merciful God, very patient, rich in love and fidelity." This statement highlights God's will. To hear the pleas of his servants and their readiness to act with compassion. In response to the passionate intersection, history reveals not only the compassion of God, but also the importance of perseverance in the pursuit of justice and mercy. When did God decide to destroy the cities of the plain, including Sodom and Gomorrah? The Bible records a significant event in which Lot and his family were rescued by two angels sent by the Lord before the destruction of Sodom. This redemption was due to divine mercy and God's commitment to the covenant with Abraham. In the face of the insistence of the inhabitants of Sodom on capturing the angels, they blindly afflicted the men. Angels then. They ordered Loki to take his family out of town. Destined, Lois and Toole demand that the angels take him out of the city by force. During the escape, the family was warned not to look back. But Lot's wife disobeyed this order and was turned into a pillar of salt. This dramatic transformation serves as a representation of the consequences when we ignore divine guidance. The transformation of Lot's wife into a salt statue illustrates in a striking and moral way the consequences of the choices. Although Lot was spared the impending destruction, they do not exempt him from the moral consequences of his decisions. His choice to live near Sodom exposed his family to a corrosive environment, revealing his struggle to maintain moral integrity amid the surrounding corruption. Lot's struggle resonates with the contemporary challenges Christians face in societies permeated with values that are contrary to biblical teachings. After leaving Sodom, Lot and his daughter, they took refuge in a small town, fearing for their own lives. They took refuge in a cave in the mountains, showing their hesitation to trust the plan completely from God. This attitude contrasts with the unwavering confidence shown by Abraham during his journey. In the face of uncertainty and challenges, Lot chose to take refuge in a cave, which in a sense represents the tendency of human beings to seek isolation in the face of adversity. The cave symbolizes not only a physical shelter, but also a state of emotional and spiritual isolation. This raises the question of how traumatic experiences can affect a person's ability to fully engage in life and relationships. It was in this place that a terrible thing happened, which made Lot's daughters fear for their safety, worried about preserving the family line. Feeling isolated and without the prospect of finding a husband, they came up with a plan. At some point, Lois's daughters intoxicated their father, and driven by a lack of understanding of moral and ethical norms, each slept with Lois on consecutive nights, seeking to generate offspring from this incestuous union. From this union came Moab and Benami, giving birth to the nations of Moab and Monit, respectively. These peoples have caused various problems for the Israelites throughout biblical history. The biblical account of Lot continues to highlight his complex and controversial relationship with his daughters after the events of Sodom. However, after this point, Lot's story remains without further details. It is uncertain whether he will be able to rebuild his life, or if your days ended in the cave in the mountains where the events took place with your daughters. It is important to note that the Apostle Peter mentions Lot in his second epistle, specifically in verses 7 and 8 of chapter 2. This passage is another reference to the episode of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the New Testament, Jesus also mentions Lot in the Gospel of Luke. In an apocalyptic context, recalling the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the salvation of Lot, this account serves as a reminder for the end times, emphasizing the importance of readiness and obedience to God. The biblical account shows that Lot had the opportunity to learn from Abraham, recognized as the father of faith. However, unlike his uncle, Lot did not follow the path of faith. Choosing to be guided by one's own perceptions and desires, this personal approach has caused great suffering and left a deep mark on one's family. The story of Lot serves as an example of the consequences of choices based more on personal views than on faith and divine guidance. There are valuable lessons for contemporary Christian life that emerge from this account. In this passage, the account of Sodom and Gomorrah highlights the importance of making ethical decisions, even in the face of adverse cultural pressures. In his letter to the Romans, Paul exhorts dwarf believers to conform to the standards of the world, but to be renewed by the transformation of the mind, as mentioned in Romans 12, verse 22. This passage highlights the need for contemporary Christians to remain firm in their faith and moral values, regardless of external influences. May the story of Lot be a source of inspiration for you. Share your thoughts in the comments and send this video to your friends and family. May God bless them. See you soon.